Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Queensborough Hall. My name is Maricela Cano. I am the Director of Community Boards for the Queensborough President's Office. I am pleased that you can all join us today. You are all part of the 2023 cohort of Community Boards, so congratulations to everybody. So with great power comes great responsibility, and I can assure you that this is the first day of a 2-year appointment. You'll have the opportunity to make an important decision on behalf of your community and the Borough of Queens. Before we move on to the swearing-in portion of this program, I do want to share with you a couple of tips that will help you become a successful board member. Number one, the community board is a place to discuss, deliberate, and vote on issues. It is not a lobbying group. You have been selected to decide on issues that would best benefit your community, not yourself. Your district managers are your best resource. In Queens, we have district managers who have been serving their respective boards for many, many years. They're going to guide you to navigate your tenure in the community board. Please reach out to them, call them, email them, and establish a relationship with them. They are honestly one of my closest people here at Borough Hall. And Borough Hall is here to guide you and to serve you. If you have any questions or inquiries, you can always reach out to me, Maricela. I think you've all received at least an email from now from me about any questions or inquiries you have about community boards. We are here to help you. Please call us, email us regarding anything about how big or small the question is. Lastly, I would like to give a really big thank you to the mighty team of community boards. So please stand up, Khalil Bragg, and wave. Ambarito, Katarina, Christian McNally. Those are your liaisons. They will be running your community board. So again, if you have any questions, they are there on behalf of the Borough President. So please reach out to them if you have any questions. I would also like to ask the chairs and the district managers to please stand up. I have Florence, Betty Bratton, Karen Peterson, Debbie Markell, and I know I saw Marilyn McAndrew somewhere, but thank you so much for being here and coming. They are, again, the resource. Please reach out to them. Please establish a relationship. Last but not least, I'd like to thank Alan Susher, who is the General Counsel, who is somewhere around here, who's also the General Counsel of this office, but took a lot of time to interview a lot of you, to speak with you, to see who would be the best fit to represent the community board. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the Queensborough President, Donovan Richards.
Well, let's give it up for Director of Community Boards, Maricela Cano. No, y'all need to do better. Hopefully she's going on vacation soon. But truly want to thank each and every one of you. And are y'all ready to serve, most importantly? Who's ready to serve? So it is great to be here tonight to congratulate each of you on your appointment to your local community board and to kick off our orientation program. To the community board district managers and chairs who are here tonight, thank you for the incredible work that you do for our borough every single day. It's an honor to truly call you partners, and I often say that, as government officials, yes, we do have a role in facilitating and navigating with agencies, but it's really the people on the ground that are critical in helping us to achieve this goal. And it really does take a team effort. So I really want to thank y'all. We can never pay you enough for what you do. So they like give us more money. Also, just once again want to thank the staff who made this possible. I know Maricela recognized many of you, but this would not be possible without you. And when I ran for borough president, I ran on a commitment to making sure that our community boards are more transparent, but more importantly, what we did in the office was critical. One of the things that wasn't happening prior to us being here was we wouldn't send a letter out to you to let you know whether you were appointed or not appointed in some cases, and we wanted to be very transparent. So I want you to know that you all are really a special bunch. And saying that, Queens is a very special place. We talk about our diversity here. And I ran on the theme of making sure sure that our community boards were reflective of the very communities that you live in. And I can tell you it's really been great work by the office in ensuring that we could actually achieve more diversity across our community boards. Let me say, Queens is special for several reasons. But I will continue to talk about that diversity. 190 countries represented here, 360 languages and dialects. And really, you're the answer. You know, people get up and every once in a while, we encounter hate crimes across this borough. And you are the antidote to that in this room. By you being all together, getting to learn each other, getting to learn your cultures, and even being able to work through those differences are critical in breaking down those silos that we often encounter across our boroughs. So community boards really play a crucial role for that reason. They give a voice in government to those aspirations by bringing neighbors together to consider important questions about the future of their neighborhoods. Because community boards serve such an important role, I do believe it's crucial that they look, sound, and feel like the communities they serve. And that's why I'm so proud to have been able to appoint such a diverse group of public servants to our boards during my time in office. Today, our boards are much closer than they've ever been to reflecting that vast diversity I spoke about a minute ago. And this year, I appointed 366 members for the 2023 to 2025 terms, and 116 of those members are new appointees, which is a record for our administration. What I would ask you to do is, if you are a new member, please raise your hand. Wait, raise it again. I just want to take this in. Changing of the guard is what I call it. So over the past 3 years, my office has received, you want to get a load of this, 2,700 applications for community boards. Think about that. And I thought, really, and I talk about this all the time, when I came in the office in 2020, I said, maybe people are just bored because we got 91 applications. I was like, okay, everybody's home. Maybe, you know, ensuring that the application is online, maybe that's why people are interested. But then we kept seeing 900 just about every year since we've been here. So more people than ever are eager to serve their communities, and that does mean competition for limited spots. So when people tweet at me, I just laugh. I'm like we got 2,700 applications, it's like 200 spots. But let me just say this is why you must show up, my friends. You were selected to serve because I believe your voices are needed, and you show that you are willing to put in the work. And I will get into the code of conduct in a second, but showing up is 99 to 100% of the job. If you have legitimate excuses why you cannot attend, please make sure that the district managers are aware of why you cannot attend, because I will be the first to say, you heard that number 2,700, I will remove it. Okay, just putting that out there. So if you don't show up, we will remove you if you don't have a legitimate excuse. On your seats, you received a copy of my code of conduct for community boards. That document spells out the basic rules that you need to follow in order to continue serving. But being a successful public servant requires much more. You need to do your homework on the issues. You need to show up to meetings. You need to engage in good faith with other members of the public. You need to vote publicly for what you believe is in the best interest of your neighborhood, not just for yourself. And let me just say that, even through differences, respect is something that is critical. So if you don't agree on something, that's okay. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And we all have fallen short in that area, so I'm not here to preach to you. But what I would say is we achieve so much more through respectful dialogue. And you need to understand how the board works and how the chair presides over meetings and serves as the chosen representative of the board, and how the district manager runs the board office and works with agencies to turn the board's decisions into actions. Serving on a community board isn't always glamorous. It's a big time commitment. Meetings can run late. All right, let me say that again. Meetings can run late. And sometimes you'll need to vote on controversial projects where you and your neighbors, once again, don't see eye to eye. So I want to sincerely thank you for your dedication to this job. Even though you're all volunteers, I'm still going to call it a job because you'll be spending lots and lots of time starting tonight learning how local government works. But when you weigh in on zoning, land use, and other issues at future community board meetings, know that your voice matters and you're helping shape the future of your neighborhood, and most importantly, you're helping to build a stronger Queens. Now, with that being said, I'm going to ask you all to stand. It is time to take your oath. And if you are able to do so, if you can't rise, I understand it as well. So you can't. But I'm going to ask you to please rise and raise what you did. Rise, raise your hand. And you're going to repeat after me. Are you ready? You sure? There's no turning back after this. Sure. All right. I, and state your name, do solemnly swear, affirm, that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of New York, the Charter of the City of New York, and the bylaws of Queens Community Board. State your number. You should know your number by now. And that I will carry out the duties of my office to the best of my ability. So help me God. Congratulations, class. That being said, God bless each and every one of you. Tonight you're going to get an orientation. I'm sure Maricela will go through what you're going to be learning tonight. Once again, please study your craft. A lot of zoning, budget debates will happen. It's so important that you really study your craft, all right? Thank you all. Congratulations.
All right, guys. So we are going to start with my colleague, Vicki Garvey. She is the Director of Planning. She will give a quick presentation on planning. And then after that, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 presentations. So we'll try to wrap up as quickly as possible, hopefully before 8. So Vicki, please come up.
Hello, everyone. How are we doing tonight? Good. Okay. Sorry, one moment as we get the presentation up. Members, and also give a hearty welcome to all the new community board members. This is a really exciting night. I know there's going to be a lot to listen to and to take in, so do the best that you can, especially with my presentation, because even though it's very important, I know it's easy to kind of get lost in the details, so I'll do my best. But I'll have my contact information at the end, so you can always reach out to me if you have any questions. So without further ado, I'd like you to meet our team. So you have me, Vicki Garvey. I am the director for President Richards in the Planning and Development Department. We have Lisa Atkins, our director of housing, who's here. She can raise her hand. Oh, there she is. And we have our borough planner / community associate named Sola Olasunde, who's not here tonight, but as you can see, we are a small but mighty department of 3. And we work on different land use projects throughout the borough. And one of our main focuses is on Mueller projects, which I'll explain in just a moment. So show of hands, since a lot of you are brand new, who knows what ULURP is? Raise your hand if you know what ULURP is. Okay, all right. Maybe like 30% or a little less. That's okay, great. so I'm going to walk you guys through the timeline. So the city charter mandates a public review process every time a change to the zoning map, text, or other land use actions that require approvals. So ULURP, this is the full name, Uniform Land Use Review Procedure. It's a very long name, so obviously the abbreviation helps. So each entity on this flow chart has a certain number of days to review a ULURP project, have a hearing, and then vote or write a recommendation. So as you'll note, CBs are an integral part of this process. So I'm just going to quickly talk about, I'm going to take this off. So I'm just going to quickly talk about, so for those who don't know what ULURP is, it's the city's land use review procedure. So every time that there's a change to the zoning map, the zoning text, we take into account all the different applications that are put through our office. So I'm going to dive into the application itself. We have a couple different areas. So within the application are a bunch of different documents, and I apologize, this might be a little dry, but I'm going to try to get through it as best I can. So first we have the project description, and that basically tells you everything you need to know about the project. It tells you if there is a rezoning, if there's a special permit. How many people know about the project Innovation Queens? I just want to see a show of hands. That was a very controversial project. Yeah, so that ULURP application package was probably twice the size of a normal ULURP package. It had a very big environmental impact statement. It was a very encompassing application. So I just want to let you know, sometimes you might have an application like that that's very controversial, or you might have one that's a little bit simpler, where you have just one site that's being rezoned, or a text amendment that needs to go through for a different reason. And within the package, you have a series of maps and photographs that help you contextualize where the site is. A lot of you are going to be pretty familiar with the sites in your community district, but in case you aren't, it's a good way to contextualize what kind of amenities are around the site, if it's near transit, all the different land uses around it. And just a quick aside, land use means, how do we quite literally use the land? Is it residential? Is it commercial? Is it mixed use? So these are terms you're going to become more and more familiar with as you go through this process. And the entire application is available online. I think community board members may or may not still get printed copies, but if not, no, they don't. So they have to go online to the zoning application portal, the ZAP, and I think you'll hear more about that from DCP in just a few minutes. But it's also available to the general public. Anybody can go on and look up the ULURP application if they're curious. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about your role. So community boards have what they call a land use committee. Sometimes they're called something different, like a zoning committee. Sometimes committees are broken out by neighborhoods within the community district. I know that Board 11 has a couple different land use committees. They meet every month, and they have what's called like a mini hearing, where the developer comes, gives a presentation of the project that is going through the ULURP process, and the land use committee asks questions. And so those meetings are open to the public and to board members, but only land use committee members are allowed to speak and to vote on the items. So that's a good way to kind of get a bird's eye level view of what a project is before it goes to the full board. So once the land use committee meets, hears a presentation and votes, they give their recommendation to the full board, and then the full board has a hearing, and then they vote on the item. So the biggest, most important thing I would say for a community board member is to ask questions early. If you are reviewing an application that you're interested in but you don't quite understand, I very much encourage you to reach out to me, to our office, to your district managers, to your chairs. Any kind of question that you might have about an application, we can talk about, in the meeting or outside the meeting. Just want to say that it's okay if you don't know what zoning district something is, or you don't know what some kind of legalese language is. It can be very confusing, and our job is to help make it easier so that you can make the best informed opinion that you have. So then, community boards typically have 60 days to do all of this, but in the summer, so I think starting after June 1st, they have about 90 days to review the application because boards take a break in July and August. And then quickly, I just want to highlight the borough president's role. So we have our own land use public hearings, and we also we don't vote, we write a recommendation, which usually recommends approval or disapproval with or without conditions. And we have a 30-day timeline, that never changes, so that can be a pretty quick turnaround most of the time. And then after we review the application and give a recommendation, it goes on to the City Planning Commission and to the City Council, and then the mayor reviews it if they so choose. So I guess at this point I also want to reiterate that community board votes are advisory, so that means they're not binding, but they are extremely important. For one, it's something that our office looks at very seriously when we're writing our recommendation. It's something that the City Planning Commission takes seriously when they look at their recommendation. Every piece of the pie gets eaten along the way, if that makes sense. Everybody's input helps paint the full picture of what they want this project to be. And then lastly, I'm touching on this just a little bit because I want to just give you an idea of what it is. The Board of Standards and Appeals is a separate city agency that manages variances and special permits. And so applicants who are asking for a variance or a special permit have to also submit applications. They also have to get community board feedback, but they call it a letter of no objection, not a vote. And I know we have folks here from the BSA, so we'll be hearing from them in just a moment. And I'm just going to go ahead and say thank you so much for listening to my presentation. Have a great night.
Hello? Okay. Up next, we're going to have the Board of Standards and Appeals, so please come on up.
My name is Jella Krenga. I'm a project manager and team leader at the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals.
Hi, I'm Michael Bless. I'm Assistant Counsel and Board Officer.
And we are here to give you an overview of our agency. The Board of Standards and Appeals was created in 1916 with the New York City's first historic zoning resolution. It is an independent board that grants relief to the zoning resolution and other development codes. Basically, it's zoning, as you'll learn from likely from the city planning presentation, is kind of broad and puts land into different use and bulk categories. And depending on the zoning district that a property is located within, there are certain parameters and certain regulations that you must comply with in order to develop the land within that zoning district. And since zoning is very broad, many municipalities throughout the United States have a zoning board of appeals in order to prevent this idea of unconstitutional taking that is so broad it applies to large swaths of land that maybe some properties might not exactly fit into the parameters of the zoning, and so sometimes exceptions need to be made, and that is kind of the premise of our board. It allows reasonable development to occur on properties that would otherwise be undevelopable. Those are the variant applications. And it considers and grants certain bulk and use waivers from the zoning resolution.
So basically, with the board essentially carrying on the role of an expert in zoning and land use regulations, the boards have over time in the rulings on BSA decisions afforded deference to the board. As in this pretty well-known case, a zoning case that went off to the state courts, Toys R Us v. Silva, the court said very aptly that BSA, comprised of 5 experts in land use and planning, is the ultimate administrative authority charged with enforcing the zoning resolution. Consequently, in questions relating to its expertise, the BSA's interpretation of the statute's terms must be given great weight and judicial deference. So they uphold that quite well.
So our board is comprised of 5 commissioners, and then there are roughly around 18 staff members. So the actual board must have a licensed engineer, a licensed architect, and an urban planner, and no more than 2 members can live in any one borough. And here are the photos of our 5 commissioners. And some of you may know the chair, who was newly appointed this past in 2022. Her name is Shampa Chanda, and many of you may know her. She is a Queens resident, and she worked for the Department of City Planning for many years and HPD for many years, and she has come here to make this presentation as well. You know, our staff consists of urban planners, architects, lawyers, and administrative staff. So our agency, the board, has the authority to vary the regulations of the New York City zoning resolution. So most of our applications for variances or special permits will vary a regulation in the zoning. Our board also has the authority to interpret and modify certain multiple dwelling law regulations. That's a pretty infrequent type of application, but it does occur at BSA. You can waive or modify fire codes, flood regulations in Appendix G. We also have a special permit for flood regulations, and sometimes, very rarely, building code. We can also waive general city law 35 and 36. That is a state law that gives the local zoning board of appeals authority to waive the requirement to either front on a mapped street, for a development to front on a mapped street, or to be located within the bed of a mapped street. We can interpret appeals of the zoning resolution, permit vested rights, and grant special permits, as I described before. This is just a summary. Our records date back to 1916, but in terms of electronic records, we have them up to 1998. So it was, I guess, in the modern times, from 1998 to present, you can see the different number of applications by borough. We usually see 300 to 400 applications a year, depending on the year, and you can see that 27% have been in Queens, 2,865, so almost 3,000 applications in Queens since 1998. And this is just application type in Queens from 2015 to present. So we talked about the variance a bit, and that's only 10% of our application. The other one, you can see special order calendar, we can get into that later, is 31%. Appeals are 34%, and those include the general city law waivers, those include vested rights, when there's a zoning change and a building permit was filed, and they include interpretations of the zoning resolution, and then special permits, which are in authorizing zoning resolution for certain use and bulk modifications that are specifically prescribed. BSA has over 50 special permits for use and bulk waivers. And, just to give an example, we often, people, this might seem like very broad, and we received many applications for special permits for the location of schools in a commercial zoning district. They aren't in C8 in a high-density commercial where there's a lot of automobile repair and some light manufacturing. They're not permitted as of right, but BSA can grant a special permit. And there's a lot of environmental review that occurs for those types of applications, and a big focus on safety of students. And those are part of our findings, and we collaborate with the Department of Transportation and the Department of Environmental Protection to make sure that a development that contains a school it's appropriate to locate in a commercial district like that. That's just a frequent example. We also have parking reduction, special permits. We have special permits for medical offices in certain cases. In Queens, there's a flight.
Yeah, so the breadth of special permits that the board has is really quite wide. And there's some that are used very frequently, some less frequently. The school permits are very frequent. And then there's some permits that are used depending on the area. For example, there's this one for zoning resolution section 7366, which is for buildings built to a height within a flight path of an airport. So a very common thing in Queens around LaGuardia Airport. So there's a lot of different special permits, and as Joey was alluding to, unlike some of our other applications, which may be more the same kind of legal text for each type of place, special permits have very specific findings, very specific set of factors that we looked at by the board and found that are supposed to be tailored to each special permit to ensure that there's protection of the light, the air, the community, and all of these factors. Very specific.
And moving on to extensions of terms, and I would say this falls under that special order calendar category that, just has this ambiguous name. So these are applications that are usually commercial properties located within a residential zone, and many of them have actually had BSA approvals since before 1961 in many cases, and oftentimes they are gas stations. That's one of our most frequent type of special order calendar extension term applications. And there are two types of terms. There are discretionary terms that the board decided to put a term in place. Usually for a gas station, it's 10 years. And these, it's to review and make sure that the use is still appropriate within the area it's located, that the property owner is being a good neighbor and complying with the conditions the board has set in order to be a good neighbor to the surrounding residential properties. That is a great summary of them. There's also statutory terms that are prescribed in the special permits that Michael was discussing with you all, that sometimes there is, after you meet certain criteria that's very specific within the special permit, there is a time limit prescribed, and you must come back and apply again to BSA to determine that your use is still appropriate within the zone.
And I'll add as well, within the context of extension of term applications, the community boards are very helpful because they're on the ground with whatever place it's taking that is coming for an extension. The community board knows whether this place has been a good neighbor or not, whether it's causing issues. And the community board resolutions can be very helpful in providing detail that the board can then take and apply to its decision, or at least consider its decision. So always good to weigh in.
Yes, definitely, yes. Here are some examples of special permits and extensions of term. This is a school application. This one is in the Bronx, in Park Avenue, but you'll see some other examples of Queens projects. And, you know, this is a frequent special permit. There's a great need for schools in the school districts, and we actually see charter schools and religious schools. We do not approve Department of Education New York City schools. If they need some kind of bulk waiver or something, they usually get a mayoral override, but we do not have jurisdiction over the DOE schools. But we often see charter schools apply for these special permits, and they are usually a great asset to their community. We just need to make sure that there are safety measures in place, and we usually adopt those as board conditions by working with our city sister agencies. And then an extension of term. This was a great example of an automotive service station that had really nice landscaping installed, and this is an example of a good neighbor, a site that really is not imposing on the neighbors and, you know, is well maintained. So for variance, which is probably what we are most famous for, our agency, this is when the board varies a provision in the zoning resolution. And it can be, I mean, we have really broad authority to waive almost every, almost every regulation, but certain findings need to be met. We often will grant maybe one waiver or two waivers. It depends on the property. And it also, it depends on the site conditions of the property. Very small lots, for instance, may need a bulk waiver, a waiver of floor area or a waiver of height because they're so small and encumbered that they really can't build a viable building footprint. We often see small homes proposed to be built on corner lots, and corner lots have really restrictive front yard requirements. Oftentimes, in many zoning districts, they're about 20 feet, and if your property is 20 feet wide, you can't meet that. You can't develop the property. So oftentimes, like a front yard waiver will be granted just to provide a small, modest home that fits in with the neighborhood. So you have to provide evidence to the commissioners that it meets these 5 findings, that there's a unique physical condition on the site, and basically for the A finding, you compare the property to properties in the area. So is your lot really small, but are the other properties all around it small? Are the other corner properties around it small in the same zoning district? And we have very complex analyses like that go through why a site is encumbered, and it's a pretty difficult finding to meet. The board carefully scrutinizes it. And then there's the B finding, which is a financial finding, and this is for, 1 to 3 family homes are exempt from the B finding requirement. However, most other applications for variances are required to meet that. And basically, a financial expert provides a report analyzing why an as-of right would never work on the property and why a waiver is needed. The C finding is probably the most relevant to the committee board because it is about if the building will meet the character of the neighborhood, you know, will it fit in the context of its surroundings? Is it much taller than you know, adjoining properties? Is it going to be very bulky? Is it going to pose shadow, you know, impeded light and air? You know, that's where I guess the input in your recommendation would be helpful to us, especially since you live in these communities, walk by there every day, and you're aware of the different site conditions. This is an example of a variance in Queens. It is a senior housing development in Astoria, Community Board 1. And this was a variance granted in 2018. And you can see, like, this is a project that's provided senior housing. But it is built actually bigger than the zoning permits it. This project obtained, I believe, for area waiver and a few other waivers, height, things like that. So it would be much smaller building, but it's on a corner, and contextually they showed that there are other large buildings nearby, and it fits in. The public policy goal of providing affordable housing for seniors was achieved. This is an example of another affordable housing residence in Queens. Community Board 5, I believe, Cypress Avenue Apartments was, I believe, recently opened. And these are some other schools.
Yeah, sure. So in discretionary approvals, so special permits and variances, the board is also required by the City Environmental Quality Review Act to consider environmental impacts. In doing that, plenty of applications do what's called swinging out. They are written to law as a type of application called a Type 2 application that inherently doesn't have environmental impacts. Certain things like small single-family home renovations, things like that would be a Type 2. But then there's other times where an application can exceed thresholds, air quality, noise, hazardous materials. Those are then analyzed by environmental engineering science experts in those areas. And then if they cross thresholds from there, they could potentially trigger what's called environmental impact C, which is a much more detailed environmental review, comprehensive environmental review of the property. In general, the City Environmental Quality Review Act covers a lot of areas, from landmarks to air quality, hazardous materials, noise, transportation, open space, shadows. It's pretty comprehensive. So that's basically that, and it takes a lot of coordination with other agencies, including Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Transportation, Department of City Planning, Landmark Preservation Commission, and Fire Department.
So I just wanted to give a brief overview of the BSA application timeline. Once an application, it's very different from the Uber process at DCP. Once an application is filed, basically the clock starts, and our BSA staff reviews the application to make sure that it's complete. Within 3 business days of filing the application at BSA. So once we have it, within 3 business days, your community board should receive it, both electronically and via snail mail. That's how our requirements are stated. Unless the community board opts to waive the snail mail, but we still require a electronic mailing and snail delivery to community boards. Also, the city council person gets it. The borough president, our agency has spoken to these entities. They have indicated they would like to receive these electronically, so that's how the applicant usually do it. So once you receive it, we've already only had it for 3 days. And then within 60 days, we like to give the grace period of 60 days for the community board to hold a meeting to discuss the application at your community board meeting and to meet with the applicant so the applicant can present the project to you and you can state your concerns with the applicant. And then you can vote on the application and whether you would recommend approval or recommend denial of the application, and you should send the vote over to our agency. At a certain point, once BSA staff receives all the information they need in the application record, we schedule it for a public hearing, and that public hearing is when the commissioners review the project in an open forum. And all of our public hearings are, as implied, open to the public. You may attend, and there's public testimony permitted, and we accept written testimony as well from individuals. It's not just a community board recommendation. We also accept written testimony from individuals that live within the neighborhood where the project is. And so, as Michael was stating, the community board recommendations are very helpful to BSA because you are the ones that live in the neighborhood that would be impacted by the project. So we want to know what you think about neighborhood character, and we want to understand if the conditions that the board has set have been complied, if it is an extension of term.
Yeah, and then in general, for variances and special permits, it's most helpful when the community board, to the extent possible, reviews the findings. There will be talk among your staff of what the specific sections of the zoning resolution are. That is likely, it will come up, the review definitely come up with the BSA here. And you're welcome to read that language, the zoning resolution, come to your own conclusions and speak up about them at the hearing. And then, to the extent possible, it's great to put your thoughts individually and as a board, like as a board, of course, as a resolution, you can. And then on your phone, you can submit your own testimony, anything you want to the board, and then you can also speak at the public hearing portion of our hearings. And for a matter of clarification, we always have an executive review session with the board themselves, just looking over the board and the staff and speak about applications. There's a little bit of a break, and there's a public section to go back over each of those applications. And after the applicant speaks, there will be time for everyone who's there, for the public to then speak on the phone. We usually give about 3 minutes per person, but if your time goes over that, you can submit your own comments in writing to the board. And there'll be information about how to submit that and to send it to. But we want to hear what you have to say. And the more you have thoughts about an application, the more you should go ahead and share it.
And those comments will be included as part of the record of the application. So we have a BSA website that's very helpful, has a lot of information and links to sources of information. So we encourage you to look on our BSA website. Our executive director is Carlo Costanza. Our deputy director is Tony Matias. Carlo is also a Bronx resident and, a Queens resident, and he's also come here to make this presentation in the past as well. You can always call our office line, but our website has a lot of great resources, and you can also see there's a map, an interactive map where you can kind of look up approved applications. So that's useful. And we wanted to share at the end that we have been conducting remote hearings on Zoom, and we live stream to YouTube since the pandemic, as most agencies have been doing. And we will be going into a hybrid hearing format in the future, but we will still allow participation in electronic remotely. And we have detailed instructions on how to do that, and you can always call the board if you'd like to participate and find out more information about that.
next, we have DCP, Joy Chen. Please come up.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your service to your community boards. Welcome as new community board members. You've all made a commitment to serving in this new capacity, and as such, you have increased responsibilities in terms of the land use process. And we want to make sure you understand what those expectations are and how you can best represent your community's voice in the process. My name is Joy Chen, and I'm the planner for the Queens Office of the Department of City Planning, and I have previous experience being the planning liaison for Community Boards 1, 5, and 7. Tonight, we'll cover what the Department of City Planning does and what the department's mission is. We'll also cover zoning as a regulatory tool and why it's important. Finally, I'll end with an overview of the Uniform Land Use Review procedure. I'll try to be very brief because the two previous presenters also talked about it, and we'll talk about it in a more city planning context. And this presentation is meant to be very brief, so I want to let you know that there will be more detailed trainings in the future, and we hope to collaborate in the fall on these trainings so we can go into zoning, ULURP, the environmental review process, and other procedures in more depth. So when those come up, I highly recommend that you attend them. And we'll make sure that your community board chairs have all that information and communicates that to you when the time comes. It's important to make a distinction between the Department of City Planning and the City Planning Commission. We work very closely together, but we are also very different. The Department of City Planning, or DCP for short, is the city's primary land use agency. The city charter gives the Department of City Planning the authority to provide technical assistance and develop changes to zoning by working with private or public applicants for land use changes, or by responding to planning challenges by doing in-house neighborhood rezoning or planning studies. The City Planning Commission's role is to consider input from the community boards, the borough president, and the general public, and to review applications that request changes to zoning, and that may also affect the city or a given neighborhood. These decisions ultimately lead to changes in zoning, as well as changes to the zoning text. The Department of City Planning serves in a technical capacity to support the City Planning Commission, and we work very closely together. And the City Planning Commission reviews roughly 450 land use applications per year. Our agency is headquartered in downtown Manhattan with borough planning offices in each borough. I'm very lucky to live in Queens as well as work right here in this building with the Department of Buildings downstairs. And we use a diverse set of skills that ultimately work with other government agencies and the public by providing policy analysis, technical assistance, and data on housing, zoning, urban design, transportation, demographics, waterfront and open space, the list goes on. And all of these data and information and analysis that we provide at the Department of City Planning will help better inform strategic and capital planning decisions in the city. What is the Department of City Planning's mission? Well, it's a pretty ambitious one, but our aim is to make all of New York a better place to live and to maintain what works and improve what doesn't. We know this is bold and broad, and what we'll look at in the following slides is who we are planning for and how. And then at the end of the presentation, the last part of the presentation, we'll go over how, as a community board member, you work in a capacity to review land use applications and affect changes in your community. Since 2000, New York City has seen a population increase of 600,000 people, or 7.7%. That's more than the population in Oklahoma City, and just shy of the entire city of Baltimore. New York City's population is estimated to be about a little bit over 8 million, the largest city in the United States. New York City is at an all-time population high, and so is Queens. Not only is Queens the largest borough in the area, it's also the second most populated. It totals 109 square miles and has the largest shoreline. Queens is growing in population and diversity. At our current historic peak and based on current trends, it is estimated that Queens could gain more than 163,000 new residents through 2040. And population growth is one of the many factors, other than what most people imagine, that can really affect how communities and neighborhoods change, how zoning changes, and how development patterns either increase or decrease. Almost half of Queens residents are foreign-born, that's 47%, and its demographic diversity leads the city and the country. This pie chart is a good indicator of that, and you can see that the 4 racial groups represented are almost perfectly evenly distributed. These pie charts show in closer detail the top 10 sources of the foreign-born population in Queens and the rest of the city and how they compare. Note the higher South American and Bengali makeup within the top 5 immigrant nationalities in Queens compared to the rest of the city. We also see other countries represented within the top 10 sources in Queens, such as the Colombian and Korean-born population that are not listed in the top 10 for the city overall. The Queens immigrant population makes up roughly 34% of the total citywide immigrant population. And so in Queens, these are the people that we are planning for at the Department of City Planning. Looking closely at the demographics really gives us a baseline and a good segue into talking about how zoning, which can often be like a very technical and dry and complicated topic, but we can better understand how population growth and diversity impacts and affects pressures on development. Generally speaking, the goal of zoning is to control the built environment for the public good. Originally, zoning's main goals revolved around concerns about light and air, separating uses, and addressing nuisances. And today, zoning addresses a much more complex set of issues. It aims for a harmonious relationship between all users in the city, provides a level of predictability to residents and businesses, and provides a framework for future growth. What is zoning? In short, zoning establishes how a property can be used and is designed to establish a harmonious relationship with surrounding land uses in the context of the neighborhood and the city, with the public's health, safety, and welfare in mind. In a physical sense, it establishes very specific parameters. It determines what can be built, what types of uses can be built, and what types of businesses can be conducted in certain buildings, the size, the shape of the building, as well as the amount of parking that is required or permitted. And there may also be an array of other streetscape and special urban design considerations in special districts as well. So as you can see, zoning is important, and it is one of the central tools that are used in the Department of City Planning, but it does have its limits. For example, zoning cannot generate development if conditions such as the real estate market is not favorable to development. It also does not initiate or require demolition or changes to buildings or dictate construction techniques or architectural or design styles. The zoning rules that we were just talking about are contained in the zoning resolution. And back in the day, when I first started the department, like more than 10 years ago, we used books like these. They're very heavy and hard to look up stuff in. But now you can go online to the Department of City website and you can access the zoning resolution online. And development happens in accordance with the existing zoning and building code, and it's called as of right. So most development in New York City is built as of right. You don't need a special permit, you don't need to stand before the City Planning Commission or the Board of Standards and Appeals to make a special case for why you should build a certain way. You just build according to the rules in these books, in the zoning resolution. But it is a very important document, and I think currently it's roughly 4,000 pages. I'm still learning to find my way around as well. So, what does zoning regulate? In this image shows, in short, in summary, a way to kind of think about zoning if you don't have a lot of experience with it. Bulk regulations including floor area ratio, and it also establishes 18 use groups, and these 18 use groups determine what can be used and how a property can be used, whether it's residential, commercial, community facility, or manufacturing. And there are also parking and loading regulations, which have been expanded since the 1961 zoning resolution came into effect. There are a lot of zoning terms, but you can think of it, in a broad way as like a building envelope. So all the zoning rules that are in the zoning resolution that anyone can access either online or, in the book, it refers to an envelope which kind of tells you how big, how wide, how you can fit a particular type of building onto a particular size lot. And there are lot width, lot area requirements, height and setback requirements, and these might also be further regulated depending on whether the building is on a narrow or wide street, whether it's in the middle of the street or on the corner, as well as streetscape requirements about tree plantings and other sorts of requirements in the public realm. So how is zoning updated and enforced? Well, the city charter gives the Department of City Planning authority to provide technical assistance and develop changes to the zoning by working with private and public applicants or by developing neighborhood planning studies or in-house studies. The City Planning Commission enacts the zoning map and text changes as part of the Uniform Land Use Review process. So as I mentioned before, our department as well as the City Planning Commission works together in order to look at new proposals to change zoning or to bring forth new proposals for zoning changes, and then we interact with the community boards, the Borough President's Office, and the City Planning Commission, as well as the Board of Standards and Appeals and other city agencies. The DOB has the authority so the Department of Buildings has the authority to interpret and enforce the zoning map and text changes, and the Board of Standards and Appeals also has a part in terms of dealing with applications that request variances to zoning due to hardship or special sites, which they talked about previously. Okay, I'm going to go quickly through this because I think the best way to learn about the Uniform Land Use Review process is to actually go through it as a new community board member, and there will probably be, several applications before your community board that have a land use focus, and then you'll kind of learn about how all of the agencies and the steps in the process work together. And basically, when a land use application has been officially certified by the Department of City Planning, it jumpstarts the Uniform Land Use Review process. And it goes to the community board, the borough president, the city planning commission, and then ultimately to the city council that can either vote to approve or disapprove the requested changes. So within 60 days of receiving a certified application, the community board is required to hold a public hearing and adopt and submit a written recommendation. Upon certification of an application and in the environmental review, it's really the first time the community board gets a full application in their hands. But the Department of City Planning, we typically strongly encourage applicants, whether it's a private applicant, to have conversations with you at the community board before it reaches this point, right? Because many times at community board meetings, when they see an application for the very first time, it can be very surprising or jarring and not what you really want. But if they can start the dialogue, or you can all start the dialogue earlier on in the process, that can help smooth the way and have everyone share information in a more transparent way early on in the process. And that's what we aim for with the community boards. And the community board recommendations ultimately inform all other decision makers in the process, and the recommendations may be to either approve the application, approve with conditions, disapprove with conditions, disapprove, or abstain. And then within 30 days of receipt of the community board recommendation, the borough president holds a public hearing and submits a written recommendation. Following the 30-day borough president review period, the City Planning Commission holds a public hearing and votes on the proposal within 60 days. So this is a very structured, an organized process, and it has deadlines that are met along every stage of the process, and the community board does play a pivotal role within the process. The 13-member City Planning Commission kind of takes a very strong role after it's gone to the community board public hearing, and it includes 7 members appointed by the mayor, 1 appointed by each borough president, and 1 appointed by the public advocate. After the borough president issues their recommendations, the City Planning Commission holds a public hearing on the application where the applicant or their representative presents on the proposal. And the public comments are also shared at this hearing. And usually public comments are collected throughout the process. After reviewing all the public comments, the City Planning Commission schedules a vote. And then following the City Planning Commission vote, within 50 days, the City Council holds a public hearing and votes on the project. And that's kind of like the last step in the ULURP process. So thank you so much for your time and for your attention. Again, my name is Joy Chen. I work here right in this building. Feel free to email me at any time with zoning questions, land use questions. I'm very happy to help you. Thank you.
So we're halfway our presentations. Next up, I have my colleague, Iraq Chernovsky, who's going to present on budget.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Hope you are enjoying the presentations. Congratulations on you're starting in today. I personally know what you're going through. I was a community board 1 member for a while before I joined the team here at the President's office. So be ready. It's a lot of fun, and I cannot wait to collaborate with you on this. So I'm going to be extremely brief, just because this is the funnest part of the whole process, which is budget. This is a very short presentation. I believe it's about 7 slides, and I'm just going to go over a very general, word that we will get familiar with, especially with a calendar called fiscal year, for those who don't know it. But let's get into it. What is the city budget? The city budget is the blueprint or a plan that articulates the public policy that is set in place for our city through revenues and expenditures. What are these thoughts? It determines what activities are going to be funded, how the government is going to pay for these activities, and also, as I mentioned, operates in a fiscal year, which means that it starts on July 1st through June 30th. An example for this, right now, the city is going through the budget process for fiscal year 24, which will be through July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. Important details to know, just because every agency that comes to talk to you will talk fiscal year terms, so it's important for you to remember that. So the budget of the city is made up, as I mentioned, through the revenue budget and the capital plan, or capital budget plan. The revenue comes from federal funds, state funds, taxes, and the city's own revenue. This helps the city to come up with a structure to pay the city employees, youth programs, senior programs, and debt services, which then become bonds to help us fund the capital budget plan, which you can see here, it allows us to create or pay for schools, housing, or general infrastructure, which could be streets, hospitals, everything that land use works on to address through their very lengthy process, which is very exciting. It's a very, very important, your role here will be very important for us because it helps us set the response that we're going to give. In this case, I'm going to put an example in a moment for what we call the preliminary budget. So before I go there, our rules or our role here is set by what we call the city charter. The city charter has very specific timelines that determine how we have to operate. That way you will be a little familiar later on when it comes to the committee boards to hear you out on this. So the first thing you need to know is the preliminary budget has to be released by January 16th. There might be extensions if the administration is new, like it has happened in the past, but charter mandated date is January 16th. After that, we're going to go with the executive budget that has to be released by the mayor by April 26th. After that, it comes something called the adopted budget, which everyone might hear or read about the handshake that the city council and the mayor's office does, but the mayor does, which means that the city has come to an agreement on how the budget is going to look for the upcoming fiscal year, and that marks the start of July 1st. So again, this is our unmovable dates for the most part, except with very, very specific exceptions. So in this process, there's a few key role participants. The first one is the mayor. What is the role of the mayor? The mayor is the big administration that will release or issue the November financial plan. This is an outlook that allows people like us that work with budget to see more or less approximate how the preliminary budget is going to look like. This kind of raises our flags so we can start reviewing and addressing certain concerns that we have within our community boards banquets. After that, then the preliminary budget comes down, then we have the executive budget. Under the direction of the office, what we call OMB, Office of Management and Budget, it will determine how the revenue is going to look like for the upcoming fiscal year, and that way we can finance the programs through that year. I'm not going to expand more here. I mentioned that mayor's job as well is to negotiate with the city council, do the implementation of the budget, and proposes budget modifications throughout the year, meaning there's a recession, so now we need to cut programs. There's extra money, which is very lovely when it happens, so we have more money for other programs. Don't get familiar with that, that doesn't happen that often. After that, we'll go with the role of the city council. The city council reviews what we call the mayor's preliminary budget, as well as the executive budget, then holds public hearings, which you might be aware of those that are very lengthy, very informative, and that helps, the council come up with a response to the preliminary budget, and then after that, with executive budget. And you know that biggest power the council has, they can accept or reject the modifications proposed by the mayor, and all these has to be done, the clock will start ticking on June 30th. Now, we're going to pass on the exciting part of this presentation, which is the role of the Queensboro President's Office, which includes a lot of the work that you help us do on the ground in each community board. So what we do first is we receive and review the preliminary budget and executive budget as well. Right now, we are waiting for our executive budget to come out. We already sent our preliminary budget response, and a few of the district managers here remember that we had a meeting a very lengthy meeting in the afternoon, reviewing all the budget and making sure that recommendations from all of your communities were included. So that way, hopefully, on the executive budget, we'll see some changes. So besides reviewing and receiving the preliminary executive budget, we also put a public hearing. This public hearing happens right after the preliminary budget is released. This is what we call the Borough Board. So it's what we call the Borough Board budget hearing. This is what is Borough Board? I don't know if it was mentioned, so let me put a parenthesis there. Borough Board is comprised by council members, by the chairs of the community board, and a few other representatives from our office. That way, this is the Borough Board will be monthly, but in January we dedicate one special 2 days this year for a budget hearing. What is this hearing about? This is where community boards present their priorities, but as well as the city agencies, nonprofits, stakeholders, and a lot of individuals. So besides participating in your community board, in coming up with a resolution and the budget priorities, you will also have the opportunity as individuals to follow the process. So let me explain a little bit of this timeline, just so everyone has the dates stick to their minds. So July 1st, fiscal year begins. In late August through October, community boards, meaning all you with the amazing support of your district managers and chairs, will come up with the priorities for that particular board. This happens through sorry for that. Thank you. So the community boards will work on the priorities through August through October. Mid-October through November, the controller will review the previous fiscal year, or the current fiscal year, how everything operated, how well the funds were used, and what changes he recommends. In this case, Controller Brad Ladner recommends to have a better executed budget. In mid-November, the November plan is released. This is public information that all of you can go and find through OMB publications. It's a very, very lengthy document. I don't even know how many documents are, but also it's very, very technical. I'll be happy to talk to any one of you if you have interest in learning how to read it. But I'll continue. After that, in January 6th, as I mentioned, the preliminary budget is released. When this is happening, I make sure to be in touch with the community boards when they have questions, just because they also need to know how to rearrange their priorities based on what the general priorities of the district is. I'm going to put an example. Community Board 2, since the storms that they were experiencing with the lack of infrastructure there, they shifted their priorities to a very heavy type of priority. We need to make sure that the sewers are working, that there's infrastructure to address, rainfall and the intense floods that our borough has experienced. After that, we sent after the hearing and after our meeting where we determined the priorities of the community boards, the 14 community boards, and the priorities of the board president, we make sure to send it to the mayor's office, negotiate, push as hard as we can to get the best results possible, and we're about to see an executive budget to see what each one of those priorities are included. Once the executive budget is released, we'll have to work in another response. The first response was about 200 something pages. The next one should be less than 100. Then we have to send the budget response, both the preliminary and the executive budget, to the mayor, the chair, the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, and the New York City Council. After that, the New York City Council and the mayor's office will continue to negotiate, and we will be continuing to advocate for our communities as we always do. Again, there's way more information about this, but I'll be very happy to talk to you one-on-one for those who have more doubts. I'll be sticking around here and give you my information so you can reach out to me directly, or otherwise I'll make sure that through our community boards department you get my contact information. Again, I just want to thank you for your commitment to our borough. I look forward to working with you all, and get ready. It's going to be very, very exciting right for all of me. Thank you.
So we have 2 more presentations left. The next, second to last, is Alex Kipp from Conflicts of Interest Board. So Alex, come on up.
Hi, everybody. I'm gonna do this with some slides. This will make it a little easier to go. So I'm gonna spend 15 minutes with you on the New York City Conflicts of Interest Law, which is administered by the New York City Conflicts of Interest Board. That's a little agency that I work at. Most of what the Conflict of Interest Law has to say is not about community board members. It's about people who work full-time for the city like me, but there's a special section that we're going to focus on today, which is about conflict for community board members when Congress comes in terms of voting and discussions, and that's going to be our primary focus, and then we'll do a couple of other things as well. So I'm just going to launch into this super quick because I got a lot of slides to get into, and I don't want to bore anybody. So here we go. When they wrote this law 30 years ago, they said this is what it's supposed to do. We're going to promote and preserve public integrity by helping public servants address conflicts between public duties and private interests before those conflicts become ethics violations. Now, the core functions of the board are basically to give you advice on a one-on-one basis when you have a conflict of interest question so that you never become the subject of any sort of inquiry or enforcement matter or anything else. So the number one thing this board does all day, every day, is answer confidential questions from you about how to comply with this law. We do it 6,000 times a year. We'd love to talk to every single community board member whenever they've got a question. We're here for you to answer those. Now, everything's free. That's great. Everything's confidential. That's great. Why? Because when they wrote the law 30 years ago, they said, we want you guys to answer all the questions, and we don't think people are going to ask the questions if everybody can know about the questions. So by statute, we cannot even confirm or deny that you called us for advice. We can give you a copy of what we said to you, and then you can share it with the world, so we can't share that advice with anybody else. So it's a safe place to get all the questions asked, but I do want to lay out one little caveat there, and this is just true in life, not just in conflict of interest. When should I be asking for advice? When's the best time to ask for advice? When? Early, yes. Before I do the thing, because if I do a bunch of bad stuff and ask for advice, that's not advice, that's a confession. Right? Hey, I took all these bribes, what do you think? I think you're under arrest. Right? So don't do that, all this before. Nobody asks us questions about bribery, that's the DA's office, but people do ask questions about gifts, voting, and things like that, and we answer. Okay, so voting is the big thing that we got to talk about today in terms of conflict of interest for community board members. So let's do discussions first, because that's super easy. A discussion. You may discuss when you have a conflict. You are always allowed to participate in the discussions, or 99% of the time, even if you have a conflict of interest, you may participate in the discussions. But in order to participate in the discussion, you must disclose if you have a conflict before you participate. So don't disclose after you participate. Don't disclose after the vote. That's like tricking people. Like, oh, by the way, everybody vote on this thing, we'll have a conflict. No, you do it before before you participate in the discussion. When you have a conflict, you just disclose, and then you are free to discuss. Now, here's the big one, voting. You may not vote if you have a conflict of interest. Boom! There it is. And we are done. Thank you. No. Too eager for that. I got to explain a couple things first. The first thing I got to explain is, what is a conflict? And a conflict is when voting on an issue would cause a direct economic gain or mitigation of a loss to your financial interest or a financial interest of someone with whom you are associated. So now we are done. Yeah, oh no, we're not. You're right, because now we have to define what an associate is. Okay, associate for Chapter 68 is a close relative, like a spouse, parent, child, sibling, or very broadly, anyone with whom you have a financial relationship. So if your vote's going to come up and it's going to affect the financial interest directly of your client, of your employer, of your roommate, of your tenant, of your landlord, of your business partner, or your spouse or your sibling, you would not be able to vote on the issue, although you would be able to participate in discussions if you disclose the conflict. Okay, now, financial conflicts. This is a very fulsome list here. It's probably not exhaustive, but your own financial interest, the interest of associated parties, your employers, if you're not-for-profits, if your employer is a not-for-profit, a funder of a not-for-profit, if it's all funds over 10% of its budget. We got all these kinds of people who are associated with you, and you don't vote when their direct economic impact is considered on some voting issue. Okay, so now, direct is super important in understanding this. Our law makes direct a fundamental sort of keystone of understanding when you can vote and when you can't vote. So I want to do a little bit of an example here. It's one I've used a lot before. I didn't always want to be the director of ethics training for the city of New York. I had dreams once, and maybe I'll have dreams again one day, and my dream would be to own a tiki bar. So, now, let's say not only am I a tiki bar owner, but I'm a community board member. My understanding is that liquor license applications go before the community board before they go to the SLA. Is that correct? Okay, so I'm a community board member. My liquor license application is going to go to the SLA. It's going to stop by my community board first. And the first question is, well, this is my bar, so am I allowed to vote on my own liquor license application? No, because it's direct. I own that bar. Therefore, the liquor license is going to directly impact the business that I own. But, so what do? I disclose, hey, that's my bar. Then I'm free to participate in the discussion. It's a wonderful bar. Think about all the work we've done lately in the community, and keeping it strong, and free of noise at night, and sidewalks clean. I'm really stretching it here, right? But in any case, I'm allowed to participate in the discussions, but I do not vote. Now, here's the question. So now, somebody down the street from me opens another tiki bar. I think I might have an intellectual property issue with these people, but in any case, they also have a tiki bar. Now, they're down the street from me. Their liquor license application comes up before the community board. Am I precluded from voting on that? No, because I do not own that bar. There might be an economic impact to my bar if they open or close. We have no idea what that would be. It's too indirect or speculative to even guess. Therefore, it's not direct enough to preclude me from voting on someone else's tiki bar liquor license application in the same neighborhood where my bar is. It's not direct enough. So the lesson here is it's got to be direct to me or the associated party. Okay, another example. Let's say I was on the board of MoMA, for graphic design expertise, of course, as we can see. That is going to be a place where, because I have fiduciary obligations, I'm associated to the not-for-profit on which where I sit on the board. I'm going to have to use the 3 Ds: disclose, discuss, do not vote. If a MoMA issue comes up, let's say I'm on the board of Socrates Sculpture Park, right? We'll make it Queens friendly. If something comes up for Socrates, I say, hey, I'm on the Socrates board, then I'm free to participate in discussions, and then I do not vote on the issue. It's Omar Socrates Sculpture Park, which is what I sit on. There we go. Now, we're done with that. So now we're going to move into the second area where I'm going to call these conflicts of office. Now, these don't have to do with a financial connection that you have. They have to do with your public duties somewhere else. And does anybody here work for a city agency? Yeah? Where do you work? What city agency? Office of Schoolhouse, that's DOHMH? Yes? Okay. In Gotham? Oh, okay, gotcha, okay. So, Office of School Health is a good example. So, if I work for a city agency, I can sit on any committee, but the one thing I can't do is when an issue comes up that is directly back to my city agency that employs me, like let's say we're going to ask the health department to fund some initiative in our community board district, then I would say, hey, I work for the health department, Office of School Health, I'm disclosing that, now I'm free to discuss, and I do not vote. Now that's not because of a financial impact, but the reason why I as a city employee can't vote on a thing related to my agency is because I work there full time. And the votes of the community board are supposed to be unimpeachable and free from any influence from another city agency. And if I'm the health department person voting on a health department community board issue, it kind of looks like the health department's got a man on the inside. So I just practice the 3 Ds. Same thing if you work in sanitation, you would use the 3 Ds, disclose, discuss, don't vote on the sanitation issue. If you work in a DOE school, and I don't care where you work, if you're in a community board district in Queens, and you work in a school in Staten Island, first, I feel sorry for you. For the commute. For the commute. Just for the commute. It's not back on Staten Island. Right. But the problem, whatever the school is, or no matter where you work, if it's an issue that's going back to DOE, you disclose, you discuss, don't vote because you work at that city agency. Okay, so we're done with, you know, if you work for federal government, a lot of the stuff is not going to come up, you know, because it's mostly city agencies community board deals with, but if something CUNY came up or whatever, and you worked for CUNY, you would disclose it. If something, the post office came up, you worked with the post office, you would disclose it and not vote on it. But mostly it's city agencies that come up. Okay, so disclose, discuss, don't vote, and now let's move on to the chairing of the committees. So, you can be, anybody here can be a community board chair. If you're a community board member, you can be a community board chair. If you have a conflict as the chair, you are going to practice the 3 Ds like everybody else. You're going to say, hey, that's my conflict, now I'm going to participate in discussions, and I do not vote. But there's another requirement, which is that if I, as the chair, face a conflict on one issue for the night, I am not the chair for the entire meeting, not just that one issue. Somebody else has to be the chair for the entire meeting. Why? Because the chair has the power to set the agenda, right? So we want the whole thing to have this sense that no conflict was influencing anything, and so somebody else will be the chair. Chairing committees. Anybody in this room can be on a committee. I'm now going to extend my Department of Ed example. Let's say I'm a DOE school teacher, and I'm also on the community board. I can be on the Youth Services Committee. That's not a problem. The problem, though, is I can't chair the committee because I'm going to have to not vote on and not be the chair of the committee every time they discuss the Department of Ed, and Youth Services Committee is probably going to talk about the Department of Ed stuff all the time. So effectively, I can't be chair anyway. So if you're a city agency, like let's say you work for DOT, Department of Transportation, you can be on the Transportation Committee, you can't be the chair of the committee. And if you work in the private sector, like let's say you're an architect, and you've got a practice, and you've got lots of clients in your community board district. If you have to use the 3 Ds at 3 meetings or more within a year, you can't be the chair of that committee. You can be on the committee, like anybody can, but you can't be the chair if you've got to disclose, discuss, don't vote more than 3 times in a year. And that's what the board rules say. It's said that for a while now. So, if you've got questions about that, just talk to us. This is a relatively new rule, so anybody in this room is like, oh, I don't know, I think I used the 3 Ds already. I want to just call us for advice. We'll figure it out. There's not going to be an enforcement case about it. We just want to make sure everybody's in compliance with these laws. Vote tabulation. Okay. What do we need to do business at a community board? Okay, quorum is how many? Okay, 50% plus 1. Okay. Conflicts do not affect your quorum. They do not affect your quorum. They may affect how many votes you need to pass an issue, but they do not affect your quorum for the evening. That's the big takeaway. Here's an example. Let's say 26 people show up. Yay! We can do something tonight. Okay, now, 3 community board members are now, they've got conflicts of interest, so they are going to disclose, discuss, don't vote. Out of 26 people, how many eligible votes are in that room right now? 23. So the number of yes votes you need to pass an issue actually just went down by 1. And that's what the numbers will show us here. So what happens is these people use the 3 Ds. They participate in the discussion. They don't vote. Quorum is maintained because we still got 26 people in the room. But then here's the issue. When you're eligible to vote, you got 3 options: yes, no, or abstain. You got to have more yeses than no's and abstentions to pass. 26 minus 3 is 23. So now you only need 12 yes votes to pass because only 23 people are eligible to vote when you have those 3 conflicted members who are not going to vote. So the number of yes votes might change in the vote tabulation if you need to pass an issue, but your quorum is not affected by people who have a conflict of interest. Okay, other topics. Do you know who I am? That is a question best left inside your head. That's my point to this slide. It never works out for people the way they think it's going to. I've seen people get in trouble misusing an ID, misusing a badge, misusing their status, misusing a city business card. Hey, don't give me a ticket. Hey, give me free stuff. Hey, I'm threatening you. Those never turn out very well, so just remember our community board status, our city status is to get city business done. Gifts! Okay. You are a community board member. You also have something called life. So, can you continue to accept gifts from your family members and your friends? Absolutely. But if somebody offers you a gift simply because you are a community board member, that is something that you should refuse because that is a conflict of interest issue. And just to kind of, let me say, I always get this question. People are like, well, what if I go to the neighborhood bar and the bartender wants to get me a free beer? And my answer to that is, sir, you are not special. You are not special. The bartender is not giving you a free beer because you're a community board member, right? They're getting you so they get better tips, right? They do that to anybody who walks in. Right? Right? Is that true or not? Where we're more concerned is when the restaurateur reaches out to you, community board member, and says, hey, we're applying for a liquor license. Why don't you come down for a yummy fact-finding mission? Right? That's the place where you got to refuse, right? We have had a couple of cases. I will mention one case. It was years ago. It was close to JFK Airport. It was called Mattress Gate. I know, it sounds very, interesting, right? And so, what happened? There was a hotel, they wanted to build another hotel by the airport. And they wanted to make nice with the local community board there, so they gifted free sets of mattresses and box springs to the district manager and to several community board members, which is wrong on a lot of levels, right? First, it's wrong because it's an illegal gift. And second, you do not accept mattresses from hotels. Not good. So that was the case. That was an actual enforcement case, right? So, okay. Now, those are your architects, attorneys, lawyers, accountants. Listen up. If your clients want to come before the community board, you know that you got to use the 3 Ds. If your firm wants to represent your client, you're going to need a waiver from the Conflicts of Interest Board to do that. Because now your firm that you're part owner of is going to represent this person. They have to put up walls so that you're not profiting off of their business before the community board. It's possible. It's easy to get a waiver to do that, but you need a waiver. So you'll call us individually if that happens. And then you can't represent your private client before the community board, obviously, because that would be a weird thing to do. Like, hey, you know what? Community board meeting, I'm going to take off my hat. I think now I'm just going to run over here and represent my client, right? So what happens if you want to ask yourself a question? Right? You can't do that. You can't represent your client before the board. Don't keep politics out of the community board in general, and don't ask the community board staff to get involved in political campaigns. Some community boards now have their own dough, and so they are giving dough to places, like maybe small not-for-profits, things like that. If you are a community board member, you may not do business with your community board, even if you think it's a great deal, even if you think you're doing it for cost. You cannot do that unless you get a waiver from the Conflict of Interest Board to do that. And so it may be suggested because your fellow board members say, hey, we know what your business does, we really want you to do this thing, we think your rate is great. They might support it, but it's got to go through the Conflicts of Interest Board, and you've got to get a waiver to do it from us. And the waiver might be hard to get because this is New York. So the idea that the board has to go with you rather than somebody else who's not a community board member is like a little bit of a stretch. I mean, if you're from a small town like I'm from Manhattan, Kansas, right? It's the little apple, the very little apple. And maybe there's only one caterer in the whole town, right? And maybe it's your brother. But here that's just not true, right? So could this be waived? Maybe, but it would be, it's not very likely. Okay, so you can talk to us anytime, just call us. And maybe the last thing I'll say is that the whole theme of the evening is like, if you've got a conflict, if you've got an outside interest, you don't vote. So the last place I'll leave this is, let's say you were applying for a job. Let's say you're applying for a job with CUNY Law School. And while you're applying for, or let's say a better example, New York Law School or Columbia Law School, because they're private universities. Let's say you're applying for a job with Columbia University, and for some reason Columbia had a thing going on with your community board right now. Because you're in the job application process, you again would disclose, discuss, don't vote, because you've got a private interest in getting a job with them, which is currently under consideration, and you're also making a community board decision, so you have to remove yourself from the vote. Okay, now that I've done all that, this is what I'll tell you. This is how to get a hold of us. If you're nostalgic for the telephone, that's the number you use there. If you're nostalgic for the postal system, you can write us a letter. Weirdo. And if you would rather get on this, you can use this tool that brought so much wisdom and peace to the world, the internet. That's a joke. But we're the best use case, right? We're there. You can reach us anytime. We've got an intake form. It'll generate an email, and then we'll get back to you that way. Again, we work with community board members a lot. Almost all the time, it's on the advice side. So we're there for you, one-on-one. Anytime you need advice, you want some peace of mind, we will give it to you, and we'll give it to you in writing. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So last but not least, we have Betty Brayton, who's going to talk about the Roberts rules. Just one final note, if you have had a plate, had a napkin, just take the garbage with you, please. Otherwise, we have to clean it up. So, Betty?
Don't dare have to go after Alex. Take care, Alex. How do you guys make the slide? Good evening, everybody. Welcome. To those of you who are new, you're in for a lot of interesting work. It may not seem so sometimes, but it is. To all of us who are newly appointed, you have a lot to learn. For those of us who are here who are reappointed, there's always something that we forgot, and there's always something else we can learn. So this whole part of the training refers to what's parliamentary procedure and why do we use it. It's really a short version of a book that you can find that was put out by a previous administration. But in a nutshell, it's what makes meetings function. Parliamentary procedure exists pretty much for the same reasons that we have all the other rules and regulations that we have in our lives. Think about it. You do things in your own home, certain ways. Basically, sort of to ensure maybe you don't kill your kids and everybody gets along and dishes get done and all those things and how things get put away. It makes living easier. Recognizing the need and finding a solution to effectively work together in groups is the purpose of parliamentary procedure. It's a means to an end. It's not an end in and of itself. Essentially, it's all the mechanisms that people use to conduct the business of countries, municipalities, and organizations effectively. And the key word is effectively. The significance is really that parliamentary rules are just basic common sense. When parliamentary procedure is put together with common sense, groups tend to function well. In one sense, formal parliamentary procedure is just common sense said with big words. You know, we can all learn all of the different, rules about what kind of motions do this and what kind of motions do that. But the most important thing that we deal with at a community board level is that we are conducting business transparently, quickly, and in an orderly fashion where everybody's opinion can get heard. The aim to be is always effectiveness. We have to focus on courtesy to each other and to the people that we represent. We need to focus on issues, one thing at a time. The majority rules in a vote, but the minority opinion has merit and needs to be listened to. Because most people may be in favor of one thing, does not mean you don't listen to and consider and try to adapt some things from the other opinions that get expressed into the majority opinions. We have to always realize that we're a single body. We're individuals, but collectively we are a body. We're a governmental organization and never lose sight of the fact that we have to do things in accordance with the law and in accordance with working together with other people, 49 other people who sit on the board with you. We need to do it always in a manner in which other views can get heard. Pardon me, I'm a little slow in my fingers. I was hospitalized, but it's my hand, but it doesn't work as well. Some of us probably, when we hear about effectiveness, these are the basic components of a community board's parliamentary procedure. These are the things that go into the board, the bare bones. You have to have notice. We are a public body. There are 50 members to our boards. Everybody on the board needs to know when and where a meeting is going to take place. The public needs to know when or where a meeting is going to take place. You need to have a quorum. You have to have a certain number of people present in order to vote on it. In our case, for a community board meeting, it requires one more than half the board. If there are 50 members on your board, 26 people equal a quorum. You can't vote on anything unless there's a quorum present. You need an order for procedures. You have to have a written agenda of what happens when at a meeting. And that's not etched in stone. You've all been in meetings of many different types of organizations. A person may be scheduled to speak at the start of the meeting. They might run into a traffic jam getting there and be a little late. That doesn't mean, they lose their opportunity to speak. It means you can adjust your agenda to fit the circumstances that are going on. That always will happen. There will be a time, for example, on my board, there will be reports are in a certain order. But there may be someone who's a committee chair who has a report to give, who has to be completely moving on the same night, or has some other type of thing where they might have to leave a little early. So they want to move their committee report. Take them out of order. That's not against the rules. You're going to adjust and it needs to be adjusted. Discussion must be fair and it must be orderly. Now, we have all been in situations where not everybody likes what they're hearing. That doesn't mean that we be rude to each other. It does not mean that you assume that everybody agrees on something. You've got to give people the opportunity to express their opinions. You've got to listen to other people's opinions. Decisions require a vote. you're gonna vote as a board to take an action, you gotta vote on it. And you have to have a majority vote. Records must be kept. There have to be minutes of meetings. There have to be minutes of committee meetings. And sometimes boards get into approving and disapproving minutes because some people expect every single word that gets said in a meeting has to be in a set of minutes. That's not true. Bare bones of what has to be in a set of minutes is when and where the meeting took place, who was present, and any votes that were taken, and how people voted. Other than that, kind of, it's all fluff. So you don't need to waste time in well, I said this, and this one said that, as long as the basics are represented in the minutes. And there's something that you need to think about when you are worried about, gee, what every single word of what I said in a meeting isn't in the minutes. Sometimes you don't want it to be in the minutes. Sometimes people say things that, I get in trouble sometimes in my meeting because I'll have a board member get mad at me because I will cut them off when they're trying to say something. Not because I disagree with what they're saying. Not because they're wrong in saying it. If I do disagree with them. It's that they're saying it in a way that can't be said that way. And when all of the boards have an obligation and a legal requirement, our records must be maintained. And we've had instances where 20 years after the fact of a meeting, we'll get a lawyer letter requesting a set of minutes for a certain date or a certain series of dates. It's not easy trying to explain the context of what was going on in the meetings 20 years after that, but it does happen. So, you really don't want a whole lot of the extraneous stuff in a set of minutes. But that's basically what parliamentary procedure would require at a meeting. You know Robert's rules. And I bet there's a couple of people in this room who maybe don't even have a clue as to what Robert's rules really is. But we call it parliamentary procedure because back in the 1600s, 16th century, the British Parliament made some rules. And it's called parliamentary rules. And then a guy named Roberts, long about, I don't know, the 1800s sometime, decided to write a book. Because he was a guy who went around to different meetings. I think he was in the army, he was a general. And people did things one way, they went somewhere else, they did it some other way. He wrote a book. So the Crash Course in Robert's Rules, it's a book. It's been rewritten many, many times. It's been revised, and that's your first clue that those rules are not laws. They're not etched in stone. They change with the times. And in terms of using Robert's Rules, the thing to always remember is it is a tool. It's something that helps keep things orderly. When we function on the board, Robert's Rules is only part of the thing. Those of you who are new and those of us who were reappointed stood up a little while ago and stuck our hands up and took an oath. Not just ceremonial words. For us, the Constitution of both the United States and the state of New York governs how we act. The Charter of the City of New York governs what we do. You heard Alex talk about the conflict of interest. Those laws affect what we do. Sometimes the Corporation Council's opinions and decisions come into play. And then come our own bylaws and then Robert's Rules. So Robert's is kind of at the bottom of the pack. But the thing to always remember is that when it comes to, and we've all had situations, they're not all that common on the different boards, where something comes up and the rules or law says we do one thing or we can't do something. And we always have somebody. Well, yeah, but we don't have the luxury of changing the rules. If we have to abide by it, we may be able to find a way to legally work around it. But we can't just say, no, we're going to ignore it and do what we want to do. Right? The responsibility and authority to ensure fairness and conduct of meetings rests with the chairperson. We get to sit up there and run the meeting. You know, that's basically our function. And it gets complicated sometimes. And your chair always needs your help, especially on those occasions when you've got a controversial issue going on in your board and you got an angry audience. One thing that makes it easier for your chair is that the chair has to worry just about controlling conduct in the audience. It doesn't have to be worrying about taking care of conduct on the part of the board members. You know, it's a terrible thing, you know, when board members start arguing with one another. You know, as the borough president said earlier, disagreement is okay, disagreeability is not. Every board is an autonomous agency of government. The chairperson of your board is the agency head, and as such has many other responsibilities. Each chairperson has to be knowledgeable of the laws that govern it. Your people all are. But the chairperson presides at the meeting, and the chairperson has the obligation to make sure that everything in the meeting is conducted lawfully and without disruption. The chairperson, this is an important thing for all board members, both new and old, to remember. The board chairperson speaks to the press, to the board. Individual board members do not speak for the board to the press. And it is not the press's obligation to not talk. It is your obligation as a board member that when you're talking to a reporter, and you're allowed to talk to a reporter, but you have to make it clear that you're speaking your own opinion. You are not speaking for the board. Because, you know, most of the press that we deal with are very reputable. But occasionally there are people who are not. They will know they can't get the statements they're looking for out of the board chairs. So they'll go to an individual board member and say, you know, what do you think? And then they'll put it as so-and-so on community board things. You know, say, not things, or not express their own opinion. You know, it's just a way of factoring. So always remember that your obligation is to make the distinction to the reporter. Where am I here on my little list? Okay. The borough president and Maricela said it earlier. The relationship between individual board members, collectively, you are the members of your board. Individually and collectively, you have some things you have to be mindful of. Collectively, the board is the employer of the district manager and the staff of your district office. There is an employee-employer relationship. It is incumbent upon you as a board member to be always mindful of that relationship. You all know that we live in a world where actions legally get taken because of things that occur between employees and employers. The district manager and the staff that are employed by the board are employees. Individual board members do not supervise what goes on in the office. The board chairperson supervises the district manager. It is the district manager who supervises the other staff. It's not an easy thing for a staff member who has a workflow. They have Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 jobs. They have work to do that's been assigned to them to do. And then they have a board member who is part of their cause. Sending them an email or calling up or walking into the office saying, stop doing that, do this for me. You know, that puts staff member in a very awkward position. It puts your board chair in an awkward position. It puts your district manager in an awkward position. Because the district manager is responsible for what goes on at the office. The constituent service work, the contact with agencies gets done through the district manager. That is what they get paid to do. Agencies, no individual board member should be calling up agencies and say, I'm a board member on such and such a board. You know, I want you to do this, that, or the other thing. That's the district manager's job. Their charge is being the liaison between the board and agencies. Committee chairs need to also be conscious of the same type of thing. Work together with your district manager, because you may not know the full history of a situation. You know, this is Queens, and we've got a lot of issues, particularly with DOT and with DEP. They go back years and years and years and years, and there is a track record for all the different things that have been done. And your district manager knows that. They know the different conversations that have been held with the agencies. They know where the complaints have come from historically over the years. So it's a partnership. It is not contention between board members trying to tell the office what to do. That they're doing what you pay them to do, which is to enact the policies that we determine. Your board district manager is a wealth of knowledge for you, and that is who you should be talking to, not the secretary, not whoever is doing other things at the office. The district manager is a professional at the work that they do. They will respond, maybe not the second you ask them, but they will get back with you on the information that you need. Okay? Moving on to what? We have a number of different types of meetings. A board meeting, meetings of the full board, where board business is conducted. Quorum of 1 more than half, I said earlier, was required. Business on many topics can come. Then you have public hearings, which we are required as a board. Every board has to hold a public hearing every month. It does not have to be at the board meeting. It could be on a separate night or in a separate location. But most boards tend to hold their public hearings on the same night as a board member. And most boards tend to do the public hearing at the beginning of the meeting. Kind of there's a reason for that. You don't need 1 more than half for a quorum for public hearing. Public hearing, a regular public hearing doesn't require a quorum. A ULURP public hearing only requires 7 or 20% of the board. So it kind of gives the latecomers a little chance to get there. So that's kind of why you do the public hearings mostly at the beginning of the meetings. A public hearing is on a specific topic. During a public hearing, the public goes first. During a public hearing, board members are supposed to listen. Then, after the public has an opportunity to speak, and most of the time, sometimes there's no speakers from the public, but you still have to wait until the public has had their opportunity, then board members ask questions. And what goes on at a public hearing, you have a speaker who is presenting. And in terms of land use public hearings, which can get sometimes attention, you might have a guest speaker, an architect, an engineer, a lawyer, who are speaking on that particular issue. Those people are doing their jobs. They're not your enemy. The lawyer for an applicant for A very controversial land use matter is not your enemy. They're doing their job, and they have every right to present on a land use issue. That's why variances exist. That's why the ULURP process exists. There are occasions where changes have to be considered. Doesn't mean they have to be approved. They have to be considered. And when you have whoever is there presenting for it, they're not the people who get rocks thrown in there. And when you're interacting with a speaker at a board meeting, at a public hearing, you know, at the end of those, any questions, and your hand will go up, or your hand won't go up, but you don't direct any question. So you wait, you put your hand up, and your chair recognizes, because the chair is presiding, and that leads to better control of the meeting, because you don't want people just shouting out or doing things out of order, because on contentious things, that's when you can have a whole mess, and that's the old school teacher in me talking. You know, you don't want to let the kids get out of control. You know, it can be problematic. The other thing that happens sometimes with public hearings is you get to ask a question, and a question is a question, and a question gets an answer. You don't have to agree with the answer that you get, but that's the answer that you get from the speaker. It's not a back and forth discussion between, you know, a particular person and the speaker. Everybody has to have a chance to answer questions. The chance and the time to express opinions comes later on when you do the vote on it. Okay? A time at every board meeting has to be set aside for the public to speak. And that can happen different times on different boards. Different boards control whether they do it at the beginning, the middle, the end, or wherever they do it. That's allowed to put it anywhere. But there has to be a chance for any member of the public to speak on whatever their heart desires, or at least 2 minutes, or, you know, in some cases 3 minutes. That has to take place at every meeting. Committee meetings. Committees deal with a specific topic. And every board set its own committee structure. It can vary from board to board. But it is a committee meeting is a meeting that's devoted to one particular topic. Okay? You know, during any meeting, any public hearing, any committee meeting, you always have to remember that the speakers should never be disrespected. Debate is not with them. Debate is not with the audience. Especially when you're angry. Don't people up there. It's not helpful to start turning around, you know, telling an audience member to shut up or to engage in an argument with an audience member. Right? A committee's report is a recommendation. For example, if the committee votes to recommend approval or disapproval of something, that is a motion. It doesn't require a second of the meeting. But not everybody understands what motions require seconds and what motions don't. It does not matter that in the relative scale of things, of doing things, in an orderly fashion, if somebody seconds a committee's recommendation, somebody can third, fourth, and fifth, and sixth. It's the purpose of a motion and a recommendation is to put something out on the floor so that it can be voted upon. And then we have the little kicker on motions. Whenever possible, all motions should be worded in the positive to avoid confusion in voting on them. You don't want those situations where a yes is a no and a no is a yes. Because it does and it has happened. Let's just say, for example, somebody wants to take 100 by 100 foot piece of property and build a 50-story building on it that has no yards, no elevators, no this, no that. You know, pretty much we could all assume everybody's going to vote against it. So somebody will make a motion to disapprove. And then people get confused by the a yes is no and a no is yes, and then they take the easy way out and abstain. Abstentions count with the no's. You can end up with a backwards vote, and it does happen on occasion. So you don't have to make a motion to approve something. You're not saying you're going to vote yes on it. You may all want to vote no on it. But you're putting it out there as a yes is a yes, so that it gets on the floor for a vote. Okay? You know, every board member is obligated to vote on every issue that comes forward. Abstentions should be very rare. All votes have to be public. Not always comfortable, but that's what the law is. So if you're not comfortable with having to always vote in public, you may consider being on the board because you got to vote in public. Right? Do you remember? I said, it was an old school teacher. Remember what you learned in kindergarten? Put your hand up, wait to be called on, allow other people to speak, take turns. It'd be a great help making your meetings run in an orderly fashion. Although we're all volunteers, we are part of a governmental agency. Public access is required. You gotta have notification of meetings, accessibility. Meetings have to be in a place that's accessible. They have to be accessible by public transportation as much as possible. Not always possible to do that, but you have to try to make sure they are as accessible as can be. And then, thank you for listening. Remember always that we function in what is probably the most diverse place in the world. Our Queens is certainly the most diverse county in the city and state, and it's probably the most diverse county in the nation. We represent, all of us collectively, multiple communities, geographically, racially, ethnically, culturally, with varied and oftentimes sometimes competing and overlapping needs and desires. The effective use of parliamentary procedure and good meeting procedures help us better represent our communities. This is Queens. You represent the best of what's in Queens and all of the different things that we work on to get done. And they sometimes take a very long time, which is why you are now the next generation of institutional knowledge. For this borough, you're going to be the people who know the backgrounds of some of the issues on your boards. I urge you, as we get closer and closer to tournaments, that you learn as much as you can about all of the different things going on in the board districts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betty. You are dismissed. Have a great night. Please, please, please take off the garbage.